brother flirted with my girlfriend at Christmas, so I cut him off, but my parents chose him over me, saying rather have the better son for their anniversary. But karma is a bit H. So my brother Kevin and I haven't been on speaking terms for the past 3 years, and I don't think that we will ever be able to sort it out. And yet, in spite of claiming that they are going to be on my side until Kevin apologizes, they decided to invite Kevin to their anniversary party a few days ago. I, 30M, and Kevin, 26M, never used to get along as kids, and by the time we reached our teen years, we hated each other's guts. After we moved out, we started interacting less and were a little more civil to each other, but still didn't like one another. And then, 3 years ago, he did something unforgettable at our parents' Christmas party. I had brought my girlfriend at the time along with me, and we had been going strong for almost 4 years at the time. I had even told my parents to invite her parents because I intended to propose that night. Kevin knew how serious we were about each other because she had attended every family event with me in the past, ever since we had started dating. I don't think he knew that I intended to propose, but it doesn't matter because even if I was not planning on that, he still had no business hitting on her and trying to convince her to leave me. I know you guys must be thinking that he and I are not on speaking terms anymore because he ended up actually convincing my girlfriend, but luckily, my wife is not that stupid. Bella, my wife, told me about what Kevin had been trying to do literally minutes after it had happened, and told me that apparently he had pulled her aside, while I was busy speaking to some other relatives, and told her that he would treat me way better than I ever could, and all she needed to do was say yes or give him a hint. It had really creeped her out, and after I heard about what had happened, I decided to confront Kevin immediately. I didn't care that there were a bunch of people at the party. All I wanted to do was get this rage out of my system, so I confronted him, and it ended in a huge fight. It had come as a bit of a shock to me, if I'm being honest, because we had been civil with each other until that point, so he had no reason to go out of his three-way and ruin things. Even after I had consulted him, he kept insisting that he hadn't done anything wrong because he really liked Bella and her vibe, and he thought that she could do way better than me. After a point, the argument got so heated that I ended up getting all up in his face, and we had to be pulled back because the fight was going to get physical if we hadn't been pulled apart. That was the incident that was the last straw, and I told my parents that I was not going to be interacting with him anymore, and if he was invited to any events, I would not be attending. It was as simple as that for me, because not only had he insulted me, he had also made my wife uncomfortable, and that was unacceptable. Since then, my parents and most of my immediate family who had witnessed our huge fight that day, decided to cut him off because everyone knew that he was wrong here. A few months ago, though, my parents told me that he had reached out to them and a couple of other immediate family members as well, and told them that he was really sorry about everything. And apparently, my parents and these other people had decided to forgive him and give him another chance to show that he had changed as a person. The funny thing is that the person he had actually messed with is the only person who did not receive an apology, me. Neither did I get an apology out of him, and nor did my wife, which was crazy because even if he didn't apologize to me, at least he could have apologized to her because he really creeped her out that day. Even crazier is the fact that I didn't even know about any of this until recently, when I found out that they had decided to invite Kevin to their 35th anniversary party. I was the one who was in charge of making sure that all the guests on the list received an invitation, and that's how I found out, completely coincidentally. I am sure that they were not even planning on telling me until the day of the party. When I saw that Kevin was on the guest list, I decided to confront my parents about it, and that was when they told me that he had reached out to a couple of people from the family, including them, a couple of months ago, and they had decided to forgive him, and so, he had been invited to the party. They made it sound like it was no big deal, even though they knew that I did not want to see him at all. So I made it very clear to them that if they were going to invite Kevin, I was not going to be attending. Because whatever had happened all those years ago, I hadn't moved on from it because it was not something that I could forgive. And I'm sure that neither would my wife, so they could either have me and Bella at the party or they could have Kevin, and they had to make their choice. Obviously, they started arguing with me and told me that I was putting them in a difficult position because they had already told Kevin that he would be invited, and it would be rude of them to not send an invitation after that. They also made it seem like I was overreacting because whatever had happened, it had happened in the past, and they wanted me to let it go. After some back and forth, they realized that I was going to stand my ground and not attend the party if Kevin was attending, and they eventually just gave up. So then, they told me that it was fine with them if Bella and I were choosing not to attend because they would rather have their better son at the party, since Kevin had been very nice to them in the past couple of months. Which makes sense, since he was trying to make it up to them, and had probably been buttering them up. After they said that, I just hung up and then didn't speak to them again. This was a couple of weeks ago, and about 2 days ago, they finally had the party at their house, and Bella and I decided to sit it out. It didn't even make much of a difference to us, and we had a much better time by ourselves, so we decided that we were going to stay no contact with my parents until they apologized. They haven't done that yet, but for some reason, they still have the audacity to expect me to help them out, because Kevin turned out to be Kevin and betrayed them. Apparently, the day after the party, my dad was working out of home, and while he was in the home office, he realized that a bunch of papers were missing. These were important documents since they contained the strategies for the next financial quarter for his company, financial records, and even a list of the biggest client contacts. In the wrong hands, this could prove to be very bad for the company, and he had a copy of everything on his computer, but he was just worried that with access to these papers, Kevin could really mess them up. I found it a little strange that my parents were so sure that it was Kevin who had taken those papers because, for all they knew, it could have been anybody. They had called me up this morning and told me that they really needed my help to find out where Kevin was because they believed that he had taken these papers, and when I asked them how they could be so sure, they told me that Kevin had left his business card on the desk, probably so that our dad would know exactly what had happened. Unfortunately for them, Kevin had been working for one of their competitors for the past couple of months, and this was just corporate spying at its finest. They had no idea because Kevin is their son, so naturally they didn't feel the need to conduct any background checks, and whenever they had asked about what he had been up to career-wise, he had just told them that he was in between jobs and then he would change the topic, so they had no idea exactly where he had been employed. Now that he had run off with those documents, they needed my help to track him down because they had been trying to contact him, but hadn't received any word. My dad was getting really worried because if these papers had been stolen and fell into the wrong hands, which they inevitably would, there was a high chance that the board might just fire him from his own company. I couldn't understand why they hadn't reported it to the cops because since this was stealing, I'm sure that they would press charges against him. But my mom told me that she didn't want to go to the cops with us because she didn't want Kevin to get into too much trouble, she just wanted to speak to him and get those documents back. I couldn't understand why they were reaching out to me of all people because I was the least likely person who would be able to help them out, since I did not get along with Kevin. So I told him that it was really sad, whatever had happened to them, but they had better speak to the cops rather than wasting the time speaking to me. I didn't think I would be able to help them out, but then, my mom told me that I was the only person who would be able to help them out because of my line of work. For context, I work in cybersecurity as a tester, so I'm what you guys call an ethical hacker. The most important part of my job is the ethical bit, which means that I'm not going to do anything that is actually a cyber crime. It's literally what I work against. So when my mother suggested that I could maybe hack into his account, find out where he was, and get him to talk to them, I found it pretty insulting and outrageous. And it was not just because they were trying to take advantage of my position and skills, it was also because I hadn't forgotten how they had insulted me by telling me that they would rather have their better son at the party than me. And now that their so-called better, the son had screwed them over, they needed my help. How convenient for them. I immediately went off on them and told them that I was not going to do anything to help them out because they had created the situation for themselves, and now, they could either deal with it the right way or they could get into trouble and let Kevin get away with whatever he had done. I thought I was being quite fair by telling them to go to the cops with this because Kevin had literally left his business card on the desk on purpose, and it was only because he knew that his parents were not going to do anything to get him into trouble. I thought that they were being fools by letting him get away with this, and yet, they didn't seem to pay any heed to whatever I was telling them. When I realized that there was no point in talking to them because they were going to keep arguing with me, I just hung up. I was going to block them, but then, they sent me a message saying that they were really desperate for my help and wanted me to talk to them. So I decided to text back and tell them that I had already said whatever I had to say, but I was not going against my ethics and morals to help them out here. Then, my mother sent me a voice note of her, crying, and saying that she felt like she had been totally abandoned by both of her sons and she couldn't believe that even I was doing this to them. Because apparently, I was supposed to be the more understanding guy here in this situation, since I was older. They wanted me to think about it from their perspective and realized that they did not want to throw my brother under the bus because no matter what he had done, he was still family. I just couldn't fathom how they were fine with literally getting cheated by Kevin and still, they couldn't find the courage to stand up against him. They were still trying to get me to step in and help them out instead of doing the right thing and going to the cops, simply because they were too weak to do so and care more about their family reputation rather than themselves. It just made me so angry that I responded to her voice note, saying that after how stupid they had been, I don't feel sorry for them at all, since they totally deserve this. They knew that Kevin was not a good person, they should have known, especially after what had happened to me. In spite of that, they decided to give him a second chance, and even after he had made a fool out of them, they still cared about him being family more than they cared about their livelihood. I told them that it was really stupid of them to expect me to be sympathetic towards them, especially after they refused to stand up for themselves. If they didn't even have the courage to take a stand for themselves, there was no way that I was going to do it for them. Then I finally blocked them because I didn't want to deal with this anymore. But a couple of hours ago, they reached out to me from another number and told me that it was really insensitive of me to say that they deserved this because all they had wanted to do was trust their own child. They told me that as parents, they felt like it was their duty to forgive their kids when they made mistakes and they were not going to be villainized for it. They said that I had also made mistakes in the past and they had always forgiven me. And it was insensitive for me to say that they deserved this because they had decided to give Kevin a second chance as well. So I'd for telling my parents that I was not going to help them and that they deserved to get screwed over by my brother for trusting him? Update 1. Hey, so I blocked the other number that my parents had to reach out to me from as well because I really didn't want to speak to them. One thing that most of you guys in the comments pointed out, they still hadn't apologized to me, even after so much had happened. They had so much to say to me, yet I'm sorry was not one of those things. And you guys were right, I don't owe them anything, I don't need to help them out, and I don't need to feel bad for them. I had told them that Kevin was not worthy of being trusted and then knew about everything, and yet, they had chosen to give him a second chance. It's true that they had given me a second chance as well, but whatever I had done was way less outrageous than what he had tried to do. You guys wanted to know exactly what they had given me a second chance and forgiven me for. So in the past, when I had just graduated from college, I had unfortunately been scammed. Back then, I had just started earning and I had invested in something, and I don't remember exactly what, but it turned out to be a bust and I got scammed. So my parents bailed me out by helping me out with money for a couple of months since I still needed to pay for rent and everything. But I don't think that was fair for them to compare what I had done to what Kevin had done, because back then, I didn't have any bad intentions. I just made a bad choice and it was unintentional. Obviously, I did not want to lose money. But what Kevin had done was completely different. He had chosen to hit on Bella when she was with me, knowing that it would not be good for any of us. He was not a good person, and it's not like my parents were unaware of it. In spite of that, he had been called a better son, just because he had been very kind to them for a couple of months and had been taking out a lot of time for them. Well, now they know why exactly he had been doing that. And in spite of that, they had not thought that it was important to apologize to me. They only wanted to guilt trip me and force me to help them out. Well, that was not going to happen. My morals and principles matter to me more than anything else, especially in my line of work. I also decided to block the other relatives, my immediate family, like my aunt and my uncle, who had decided to forgive my brother. Because I realized that even though I had been missing the party, they hadn't even bothered to ask me why I hadn't attended. I don't mean to come off as entitled, but I would have definitely reached out to them if I had been in their place. But I guess this was eye-opening for me because I know my position in their life now, so I'm gonna keep that in mind. And so, I blocked them. Honestly, it's not that much of a big deal for me because I know that I have Bella by my side, so it doesn't really matter if I'm in touch with my family or not, because while I really liked these people in the past, I don't think it's more important than my own well-being or my mental health. And if they are being toxic, I don't need them in my life, because for me, maintaining relationships and keeping the peace of the family is not more important than my own self. Bella has also told me that she's really glad that I decided to cut my parents off because she couldn't believe that they decided to Kevin, even though they knew that she had felt really uncomfortable the day that he tried to hit on her, because he had literally pulled her aside and tried to speak to her in private about things like this. Even when she kept telling him that she didn't want to talk to him, and she just wanted to go back to the Christmas party, he kept insisting that he was the better choice for her. And for me, I don't think I would have forgiven him for something like that, even if Bella had not been my wife. I don't think people should be treating any women like that. It's just weird and creepy. Moreover, my parents did not even realize that, even though they had been apologized to, it was actually us who deserved that apology. I don't even know what they were thinking. They were probably just not thinking at all. Anyway, whatever the case is, Bella and I have decided that we are not going to have any contact with my family anymore because this is not worth it. Almost 4 days have passed since I last spoke with them, and since then, they have been blocked. They have not tried to reach out to me again after that, but I'm sure that they will. Even if it's not to ask for help, I'm sure they will come up with some reason to make me the bad guy and get on my nerves. So I'm mentally prepared for that, and I know what I have to do if that happens. Update 2. My parents reached out to me via email today, 3 days after my last update. So I had been expecting them to bother me, but surprisingly, they decided to tell me that they were really sorry about everything. They told me that they had not been thinking straight that day because they were really panicked and nervous and didn't know what to do. They didn't even have any idea how badly they had behaved with me, since it was all just a blur for them, but they wanted to apologize for all of it because I did not deserve to be treated like that. In the email, they mentioned that they had reached out to Kevin one last time before they did anything, and told him that they would be going to the cops because they had been left with no other choice. They had also told him that they knew he was taking advantage of the fact that he was family, and that was why he had left that card on the desk on purpose, because he wanted to rub it in their face, that even though they knew exactly who had stolen those papers, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it because they care too much about family relationship and their reputation. But now, they had decided that their business matters to them more than all these things, since it was irrelevant what other people felt. For a while, he had not been responding to them, but now, they had made up their mind and they just wanted to give him one last chance to return those papers and no harm would be done. To that message, Kevin had finally responded and told them that they were right about everything. He had indeed left that card on purpose because he knew that he would not get into any trouble with them, since they were never going to report this to the cops. And he just wanted the satisfaction of knowing that he was right. He was actually just messing with them because he didn't even work for their competitors. On closer inspection after receiving that message, my dad actually realized that in his state of panic, he hadn't realized that this card was a very obvious fake. But they had no reason to celebrate because that was not the end of it, since my brother had come up with a very twisted plan to get some money out of my parents. Apparently, the only reason he had confessed to the fact that he hadn't been working for their competitors was because he wanted to let them know that he still had the papers with them, and he could sell that information to their competitors and get a huge amount of money for it. Or, my parents could give him the same amount of money and get their data back now. And even if they went to the cops with this information, it would be pointless because by then, he already would have sold their information, and even if the money that he would get from it went to waste, their competitors still would have that information. So now, they had to pick between giving him a bunch of money and retrieving whatever information had been stolen, because even if they went to the cops and he was arrested for stealing, it was still pretty likely that the information that had been stolen would reach their competitors, and they couldn't afford that. But they also couldn't afford to pay him the kind of money that he was demanding, and so, they were in a lot of trouble. I mean, saying that they wouldn't be able to afford it was not right, but it would just create a lot of havoc for their finances and probably eat into their retirement funds. Apparently, he was doing this because, for the past couple of years, he had been struggling financially, and yet nobody from the family had thought that it was time to forgive him or even talk to him. So he decided to get his revenge this way, and I have to say, he came up with a pretty clever plan. Anyway, I was lucky that I was not a part of this in any way whatsoever, and it was all my parents' problem to deal with. After reading that email, I told him that I forgive them, but I would like some space from them at the moment because I don't think I want to go back to having a relationship with them again so soon. I didn't think that they were going to take that nicely, but within a couple of minutes of me sending that email to them, they told me that they completely understood and all they wanted to do was just apologize to me for how they had behaved, because it was not nice and they should have known that Kevin was not a good guy that he was supposed to be. They also apologized to Bella specifically and said that after the way Kevin had behaved with them, they had no business speaking to him and treating him like everything was fine. They mentioned that when they had been on speaking terms for the past couple of months, he had asked whether we were still together or not, and seemed disappointed when they said that we were still going strong. That should have been a hint for them to cut him off again because he's a creep. They didn't do so because he was there. However, they realized that it's not an excuse and they really are apologetic for what it's worth. I think it's nice that they apologized and got it out of the way, and I really hope that things work out for them. But I think I'm gonna keep my distance. That's what's best for me and my wife, and I am glad that they understand why we are staying away as well. Maybe someday we will be able to work on our relationship and make it better, but right now is not the time. Update 3. Hi, guys. So I have pretty happy news. Bella and I are finally pregnant after 2 years of marriage, and we are so overwhelmed with joy that we felt like we had to share it here. It has been 4 months since we found out, and recently, we announced it on social media. My last update here was almost 10 months ago, so it's been a pretty long time since I stopped speaking to my parents, but after that announcement, they decided to reach out to me and tell me that they would really like to reconnect again if we would be comfortable with it. For the past 10 months, they had respected our boundaries and had not tried to contact us because we had made it very clear that if we were ready to speak to them, we would do it ourselves. But after we found out that we were pregnant, we kind of forgot about it. However, I was feeling conflicted about whether I should let them back into my life or not, and after some discussion, Bella and I decided that we were going to try and make things right with them before the birth of the baby, because since we were starting on a new journey as parents, we wanted to leave it all in the past. And if my parents were truly able to prove that they had changed as people, then I didn't see the harm in giving them another chance. Yeah, it kind of goes against what I said about second chances initially, but I want my child to have the chance of having both grandparents in their lives. Even if it doesn't work out, I would still like to give it a chance. So yeah, we're going to try and reconnect as a family once more. I also found out from them that eventually, they ended up giving the money that Kevin had demanded and retrieving all the data that he had stolen. They even got a lawyer involved to make sure that he hadn't retained anything in the future. He ever tried to inform any of the competitors about whatever he had found, it would be considered a breach of contract and he would definitely end up in trouble. So now he cannot use that against them anymore, and I can't say that they dealt with the situation in the best way possible, but well, it's the choice. And anyway, the point is that Kevin is out of everybody's life now, and I think that's good for everyone. He should stay away from our family, for the good. I'm sure karma will take care of it. As of now, I'm just really happy that I'm gonna be a father, and I'm spending all my time reading books and parenting and stuff, and Bella and I have really never been happier. I'm also pretty glad that things are looking up with my family, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Maybe things will get even better.